acquired and operationally integrated to Veolia North America in March. It's a bit confusing, but it's a really positive, a development in my career, at least, because we're going to a much larger organization with a lot more resources. So as Larry mentioned, my name is Keith Kolkebeck. I'm Director of Operational Control Systems for our regulated utilities in North America. I've been with Veolia/SUEZ for 15 years. Prior to that, I had some experience in the pharmaceutical space, and I spent a number of years in management consulting in the banking. So don't ask how I got in the SCADA, but afterwards you're certainly welcome to find out how I'm around. Let me first off by saying that I'm a SCADA person, operational person first. Just happened to have to get involved in cybersecurity as part of our due diligence to keep our systems safe and secure. So I approach this a little bit differently than someone from an IT or security background. So you could say I came from the OT space and now I'm learning about the cybersecurity piece. A little bit quick agenda, just an overview of who Veolia and the Municipal Water Regulated Division are, our challenges in the OT space, why we needed to protect ourselves from ransomware and how we did that, our approach, our requirements, which are always a bit unique in the OT space compared to an IT system, EDR tools, what they are, what did we pick, I'll share the vendor, won't share the surprise right now, how we deployed it, the architecture that we used, timelines, and lessons learned. A lot of lessons learned. I spent a lot of time on that and kind of what's next in our roadmap in our cybersecurity vision for our OT systems. So who is Veolia's Municipal Water? So we're a fairly large organization in North America. We're about 11,000 people. 50% of that group makes up our Municipal Water Division. And then another 50% of our Municipal Water Division is our regulated utility. So these are systems we own and operate. We operate in 6 states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Rhode Island, and our outlier way out there in Boise, Idaho. Serve a little over 2 million people with 600,000 connections. Our largest facility is in northeastern New Jersey, Bergen County. We serve about 1 million people out of that facility. So it's a 200 million gallon water treatment plant, one of the largest in the state and critical for our operations. The challenge, let me just summarize. We're all familiar with these events that happened over the last, pretty much in the first half of 2021. The famous Oldsmar situation right before the Super Bowl, remote access, compromise, change of the sodium hydroxide level for the water business. This was kind of an eye-opener. You hear about these things in the background, but this is really one of the first ones that was public in the system. From a Veolia standpoint, on our regulated side, we're very focused on protecting our perimeter. There's a great presentation by Ricky before. We've been through that effort, the remote access piece. We feel very comfortable on that. Then the Colonial Pipeline piece happened a couple months later. The ransomware affected their safety systems, part of their payment systems. Fortunately, did not affect their industrial control system, but for the first time in 50 plus years, the company needed to shut down their transmission pipeline to make sure that everything was safe. And then I'll share this one in the middle. This is a little interesting. Clint Pryor talked about this. When you look on the dark web, we got notified of someone trying to sell credentials for a $1.1 billion private water company. Had some, remote access protocol attack. They had some things like Symantec on their system. Well, it's not Symantec as a tool that we were using. We thought it was important enough that we went out there and we purchased the information to find out what this was about. So we spent less than $2,000 to gain this information. It's amazing how cheap this stuff is on the dark web, but it gave us some insight onto what was out there and what these people were doing to try to exploit a private water company and a utility. And it's very important to know what is happening, out there and what is being communicated. A lot of good agencies, they'll come and report it to you, but you also have your own situational awareness. So our challenge, our leadership, these things were coming down. I don't want to say they were spooked, but they asked some very good questions, right? It's something that you want to have that open dialogue with senior leadership. Are we vulnerable? Are we vulnerable to what? As I mentioned earlier, we spent a lot of time securing our perimeter. We've been through the risk assessments. We go through annual risk assessments, annual third-party reviews. We have a SOC. We have systems that are connected to that SOC in the OT environment. And we have penetration testing that occurs quite frequently through our internal resources that, they run that all the time on our public address space. So are we vulnerable? Probably not from an outside perimeter in, but definitely something we need to look at. What is the risk to our business? This one's always hard to summarize. And I always say that we're not in, we're in the risk mitigation business. We're not going to prevent something, we're not going to eliminate that risk. Very difficult to eliminate that risk on the cybersecurity side, and just anyone says they can, it's all right, we need to move to a new partner. Are the measures taken significant? What we've done to date, is it the best that we can do? Can we do better? And the answer is we could always do better. So let's continue to review. We have a roadmap, but is our roadmap structured the right way? You can't tackle cybersecurity, especially in the OT space, by eating the elephant one bite all at once. Got to take your time. How can we prevent ransomware attacks on our systems? Can they be prevented? And this was a gap we had. We did not have something that we knew that we had a ransomware or we can prevent it on our system. So then follow-up question is, how fast can you protect the SCADA systems? We set a timeline of ourselves. This was in about May of 2021. We wanted to be operational by October 1st of 2021. Very short time period. And did I mention that our peak production, the time we do almost no new installs, any upgrades, is from the beginning of May to the end of September. We are pumping water fast and furious during that time. So we really don't like to disrupt that process and keep everything running. Finally, what resources do we need? Not from a financial standpoint. This is kind of interesting. It was all from a people standpoint, a vendor standpoint, a partner standpoint. And then we would figure out the dollar amounts and what it would take to do later. So important, but we did set ourselves a budget to make sure that we did have some guardrails and guide rails in what we did. On the right-hand side, a little bit different approach. There's different approaches to, how this stuff comes in. So it's just important to realize how the attacks are executed. So what do we do? Prior to this, I knew about antivirus software. I really didn't know what an EDR was. Our IT department, and we had an outside company that was helping us, said that we need an EDR solution. So I'm not sure if many of you know what an EDR solution is. I didn't. Endpoint detection and response. Try to sum it up in 3 bullet points, but I don't do it justice in 3 bullet points. It's continually monitoring of each file or interaction on the computer. It's monitoring the ones and zeros, the network traffic, anything that's happening on that computer that looks to be abnormal or that could be a threat, and it's going to block that. It contains that malicious file. Importantly, it prevents it from spreading, and it isolates it. So that's critical. You want that to happen before almost in seconds or milliseconds before it spreads to someplace else. And importantly, it collects all this data, network event data, endpoint data, application data, and it aggregates that all up to the centralized host system. Another key important thing that we did is we hired an outside consultant with EDR experience and OT experience. For me, it's very important to have someone that has worked on the plant floor, that knows what a SCADA system is, what a PLC is, what an OT network is, knows what our flaws are, what our challenges are in that network. I often hear that our IT system, we can just apply the same thing we do in the IT and the OT space. While that's true for a lot of the tools, the way you do it and the how you do it is often very different. And I should say it's a consultant. We hired a partner. Consultant is probably a bad word. It's very important that we have an open relationship and open dialogue so that they can, advise us properly and that we can accept that advice. So from that, we determined what our requirements are to begin to look for a solution. And, these requirements, there's a lot of them. Supported platforms. I was mentioned yesterday in the presentation, XP. Yes, we still have XP. We support over 850 different facilities. We have a variety of every PLC manufacturer known to man. So every year, every there. So we do run XP mostly in VM environments, but we need to support that software. And we also have Linux, CentOS, and Ubuntu. A lot of these tools, these cybersecurity tools, all run in those environments. And then we have everything in between on the Windows environments. Fortunately, 2 years earlier, we turned off our last VAX box, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. So it's a flashback to the 80s and 90s. What do we want from real-time prevention? Really important that we had a connection to threat hunting. What's the benefit of doing EDR and this ransomware protection if we weren't getting that real-time intelligence from the outside world? However, we wanted to control that connection to the outside world. It needed to be centralized. Many of these tools that we ended up looking at, you needed to have every endpoint connected to the internet, which was a non-starter. Proactive risk mitigation, very important. Alerting reports, what are our risks, what are our compromises, pre and post infection protection. Finally, at the bottom, this is kind of big and bold. We can't stop our core application. We do run high availability, but we want to be able to, our operator's on a workstation, he plugs his phone into a USB, it has something on there, he still needs to run his application that's on there. We isolate and stop that, it provides the alert. Other requirements, big benefit, USB devices. We use ServiceNow on our IT side and to track and do our checklists and everything for these types of events, so it was very important to have that integration. We wanted to run, when we started this up, in what's called simulation mode. We didn't want to be fully turned on, secure when we wanted there. We wanted to fingerprint, baseline our environment, review all our applications. The product we chose fortunately had the ability to still provide us alerts on malicious and critical items that we should be aware of. So it allowed us to test not only our ServiceNow integration, but all our processes while we did that. Again, I mentioned partnership. The group we had in here, we wanted somebody with an EDR platform that these folks knew OT. They could talk our language. Finally, this one's pretty important not to overlook, and I've talked to some of the vendors on the floor, and we've discussed this, low computer and network resources. We're spread out, we're all over the place, we're connected with this tool. We have 35 locations, not the highest of bandwidth in some places to bring this data back. We needed to have that to be low bandwidth to come back, and low computer resources, less than 1% utilization, very important. So how did we select a tool? Fortunately, at the same time, our parent company was doing an assessment of 4 different EDR tools. They had some pretty decent testing methodology. Unfortunately, they're confidential, I can't really share, but I'll share that we used the MITRE framework, and the blue boxes are what we selected on. I will say, globally, they got all the OT experts together. We were allowed to review that. It was very interesting when you looked at what their criteria was, focusing on things like ease of install and use, and not really focusing on what's the outcome of the product and how well it works. I don't care if it takes 5 days to install versus 1 day, as long as I'm getting a better benefit out of it. So just something to keep in mind and prioritize what your requirements are when you're doing this type of tool. So at the end, we selected Fortinet EDR platform. It worked for us, kind of checked the majority of our boxes, had that discovery, prediction, and prevent pieces, the next-gen antivirus, real-time detection and diffusing while keeping our systems operational. Very, very important. It's something that our operations team came back and told us we need to do that. Playbooks, incident response, these are probably where we spent the majority of our time when we did this, reviewing the playbooks, everything that went in there, making sure that we had different playbooks for different scenarios. Real-time and automatic. Chris mentioned this in his presentation yesterday, how much automation do you want to have on this? Well, we want to be able to stop the breach, but we're not isolating the computer. We're shutting down the program, still allowing our systems to run and creating the alerts. We want it to be efficient. The fatigues, much like in SCADA systems, right? You can't have too much, one alarm or for every 5 minutes an operator's in there. You can't have too many fatigue alarms because people just ignore it at that point. And then minimize the impact on the business. Talked about that a lot and keeping our stuff online and safe and secure. So how do you deploy something like this? I mentioned earlier we got a 200 million gallon water treatment plant. Well, that's our single source of supply. I'm not shutting down my 200 million gallon water treatment plant for any amount of time, nor am I shutting down all our other facilities. So we developed a roadshow, lots of education to our operations team, our senior management, and we went into the control room and talked to the operators. This is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. Fortunately, our company has a pretty robust education piece on cybersecurity, monthly 5-minute training classes online. We're doing the identity management, why is this stuff important? So they were very well familiar. They asked questions. They were like, oh, good, we definitely need this. We support it. Just make sure you communicate to us what you're doing. Identifying our resources, establishing the roles of the IT team, the OT team, the outside personnel, our operations. Building an architecture that supported that centralized piece of connection, as well as connecting all these systems back and doing it securely. Ricky mentioned a lot of firewall rules in his previous one. That's where we spent a lot of time doing that. Installation of the core servers and services. You think this would be kind of a, it was a very well planned out piece, making sure everything was connected. Our security pieces were tested. And then we did a phased approach. We did a pilot and then 3 phases, starting at our smallest facilities, working all the way up to that 200 million gallon treatment plant. And then biggest part of making this operational. So I said it took, we were looking for a 6-month deployment. It took a little bit longer. Here's our architecture. I'll be real quick. We do go to the cloud for the Fortinet threat guard for the threat hunting pieces. That makes me feel better that we have that information. And the key part of that information, it's OT specific, right? You're not only getting the IT specific, you're getting the OT specific threats as well. That links to our next generation firewalls that have that same OT specific threat integration. So we bring it, aggregate that all back to one central data center. Timeline, I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned we wanted to have it on and functioning by October. We didn't. It took us to January of 2022. Why did it take so long? We had to work extensively through that playbook, our application inventory. And the beauty of the OT environment is we get the whitelist stuff. We know what we have, we know what we want to run, and we need to make sure that we cover all that. And when you're dealing with engineering workstations, there's a lot of little nuanced software that goes in to make sure that they can program tools and stuff. A lot of learning going on that actually what happens behind the scenes. And it allowed us some time to add some more functionality to ServiceNow integration. The ServiceNow is pretty critical because as soon as we have, something that might be a threat or malicious, it gets isolated, the ServiceNow is automatically, initiates the plan to respond. It goes to multiple people, whether it's 24/7, 365, integrated with our SOC, so that all works together, works really well. When we talk about our lessons learned, very important. I mentioned this. You spend a lot of time educating our staff. The how, the why did we do this? Very, very important. Allow them to ask questions. They all have my email. They have people on my team's email. They're not shy about asking, which is great. Again, that open and honest communication, not just with our staff, but with our partners in this, with Fortinet, with our consulting partner. We asked some crazy questions, and if they didn't know, they got responses and stuff like that very quickly. Tech support was very valuable in certain things that we needed a timely response to. Our timeline was too aggressive. We got a little bit ahead of our skis, but that's fine. Allowed us to, get everything done. So the majority of our time, I mentioned earlier, is understanding the application environment. We had over 300 applications on I think we have over 350 SCADA computers within the network. So there's a lot to sort out. Whitelist, we're down to 35 applications. I spent a lot of time training our security staff. They don't use the FortiEDR on the IT side, they use something else, so there was a lot of nuanced differences there. This next one is very important, and we just spend a lot of time. Collectors is how you group the buckets, so very important to have your naming standard correct on that, and that everyone knows what your naming is. So, right, we have a system in Dallas, Pennsylvania. We want to know that it's in Dallas, Pennsylvania, and that it's our SCADA server, not Dallas, Texas, and it's something else, right? So it's very important to have that distinguished, that our SOC is lined up on that, our security team, our IT team, and our OT team. It's something in our SCADA environment we've spent countless years trying to perfect our tag naming standard and replicating that through all our data, and this is just one more thing. Also want to make sure your SOC vendor, if you're using an outside SOC vendor, we have an MSP, so we wanted to make sure that they were included. Testing is a must. The security team got a little crazy with me. They gave me a USB stick with a fake testing. I'd be out in Boise, Idaho. I'd plug that thing in a computer, and I want to see what happens. So I think they've whitelisted that application, so I need to get something new. So if anyone has anything. Whitelist, we catch anyone installing any type of software on our system now, right? Our SCADA techs, they like to download things from the web. Now that they do that, they can't install it. It's blocked. They have to call up and be like, all right, now I got to make a business case and why we're doing this. Also, it goes with the timeline. There's a lot to config. Some challenges, still working through our USB policies. There's a lot to configure, a lot to set up. I'll move down. We had to end up setting up specific rules for different types of users, an admin or a high-end user that had programming tools and everything else with it. So, and then one thing we learned on the Fortinet side, these pop-ups kept coming up every time there's something that might be compromised. It was driving our operators bananas. We ended up turning them off. So we gave some feedback. Hopefully in the future, we're able to customize that a little bit so it's only very specific pop-ups that come up. I'll give you an instance. We use Chrome on the computers. Chrome has an updater that goes out there, which we block. So every time the updater tries to go connect to the web, it popped up, and it just created a bit of a nuisance. So we didn't want that to be a distraction to our operators. What's next in our journey? Ongoing refinement of the EDR. Much like Ricky for Exxon, we spent a lot of time prior to this working on our perimeter with next generation firewalls, looking at OT-specific monitoring tools. Right now, we're working on centralizing all our OT repositories, remote access, Active Directory, some microsegmentation at some of our larger systems, and then level set our SCADA staff. We have 12 dedicated SCADA staff across our business at a certain cybersecurity level of training so that we could all talk the same language. We can assess outside tools, and we all know what we're talking about. An important ongoing training and education of all our employees in our organization, whether it's IT, personal security, or OT security, it's very important. Just a little bit of an event notification, what comes in, what gets seen, but this is a malicious event. If you know what that is, that's Dameware. It's the product that affects all products. It can never get rid of, but something we don't use in our system, but we've gotten rid of it. So thank you all very much.